Our next speaker is Gwen Larned, a recent Western Washington graduate. She was the zero waste coordinator for all 4 of her years there. In fact, she created the position. While at Western, she helped create innovative solutions to address recycling and waste reduction. She runs a blog, Trashy to educate folks about living zero waste. Since graduation, Gwen has moved back to her hometown of Leavenworth and is now working for a local nonprofit, Upper Valley Mend, as a gleaning coordinator. Please welcome Gwen Larned back to Bellingham.
Hi there. I'm really excited to be here. I just hustled up from Seattle where I was at a gleaning conference. And for those of you that don't know about the word gleaning, it's the strategy that's used mostly by nonprofits to go out and harvest produce that's left on farms after farmers do their initial harvest. And then that food is donated to local food banks in the areas that the nonprofits operate. So it's like a really cool I just started as a gleaning coordinator in my hometown for a local nonprofit, and so it's a really interesting area of the waste world to be learning about as somebody that's been looking at the much bigger picture. To be in a very specific role is super cool. I'm not going to specifically talk about plastics, even though that is the topic of this whole thing. But I'm going to talk about the larger waste crisis, for lack of more specific terminology. And so all of this applies to plastic use, and it's all incorporated into the larger scheme. But I'd really like to talk to y'all about how you can be a part of the solution in your day-to-day life, whether it's in your household, your office space that you work in, or within how you operate in your community and how you advocate for city policies and that sort of thing. So it's very like action-oriented, but since I'm guessing y'all have mostly been sitting and listening so far, I have some questions for you. And I know some of you are going to be hesitant to talk to the person next to you, but trust me, it's going to be awkward for everybody. So just dive right in. So the first one is, what does zero waste mean for you? And I'm just going to give you like 30 seconds, so try to be kind of fast. Go ahead. Okay, so I know 30 seconds goes really fast when you're the people in the audience, but 30 seconds up here feels like a long time. And I have another question for you, so I hope that these conversations continue after the presentations are done today. So the next question for you all to discuss is, what do you already do in your day-to-day life that is already zero waste? You can think of the grocery bags that you bring to the store as one example, if you're already doing that one. Okay, and there's one last question. So the final question is, what are your barriers to getting closer to zero waste? Okay, thank you. I just want to bring it back together. Definitely keep these conversations going after the symposium today. Um, So I just wanted to say I'll tell you a little bit more about me in just a second, but some of you might recognize the photo on the screen. So that's Leavenworth, Washington, and that is where I was born and raised and where I moved back to after graduating in December. And living in Bellingham, we have access to a lot of amazing community resources like industrial composting collection that can happen at your office or at your home if you pay for the service. As well as having access to places like the Community Food Co-op, and even like Fred Meyer and Winco and all of those stores we do not have in Leavenworth, the access to those many options for shopping bulk specifically. And so being able to buy package free in the bulk aisle is a huge access issue for communities around this country and everywhere. And so I thought moving home that I wasn't going to be able to do zero waste as easily as I did here in Bellingham, but I actually ended up finding that our small health food store, which is called Sage Mountain, actually has a really amazing bulk aisle. And so it's just to say that some of the things we think are barriers aren't actually barriers. It's more just like a lack of knowledge or maybe convenience. But of course, in some communities, it is actually an access issue, and we need to be working on that on a larger scale as well. So that's why I like to start with this question, is so that as we go through the rest of this conversation, you can try to answer these questions for yourself about like how you're going to solve those problems. So a bit about me. I started living zero waste about 3 years ago. I was living here in Bellingham, and I was a sophomore at Western Washington University. And I started a blog called Trashy to talk about how I was going about living zero waste, and mostly to try to address the root of the problem, which is what the word radical actually means, is addressing the root of an issue. And so in talking about how to go zero waste, I tried not to encourage people to buy random products that were reusable alternatives to modern day disposables, and instead to look in their homes and see what they already had and to start where they are with what they had. And also addressing the root of consumerism and capitalism as a source of why we have become such a wasteful culture. And so that's why it's Trashy Radical. And this all started because I was at Western, and my freshman year I got really lucky and found an amazing position in our Office of Sustainability as a zero waste coordinator. And then I held that position all 4 years that I was in college. And when you study business and sustainability like I did, and then you work in the Office of Sustainability, it starts to slowly take over your life. And so I became known as the trash girl, or just like the girl you could definitely ask your recycling questions to. But on our campus, the Zero Waste Western program initially was known for education and outreach on how to recycle and compost. I didn't actually start the position, which I think was stated at the beginning of the program, so I just wanted to clarify that. But the program did grow a lot in the last 4 years, and it became more of a role to organize the conversation on campus with stakeholders that were managing waste about what our strategies were going to be long term. So a couple of the things we did, we introduced paper towel composting, initially as a student-run initiative. And then the paper towel composting program that started in our student union building within 1 year was introduced to all of our residence halls. And then this year, I think that they have done it in all of the buildings. If anyone goes to Western, you can clarify that. I haven't been in a bathroom on campus in a long time, so I don't know. But that was actually a really easy campaign for us to do, because composting in Bellingham is about 20% cheaper per ton than it is to landfill waste, because our composting facility is located locally, whereas our landfill is actually 350 miles away. So just in expenses for transporting our waste, it's a lot cheaper for us to compost. And it's, of course, more sustainable to be composting paper towels and turning them into dirt than sending them to landfill. So other initiatives like that, like encouraging students to use reusable travel mugs instead of paper coffee cups, is actually a big thing on our campus, because about 10% of what Western sends to landfill is just paper coffee cups, which is silly when we have an alternative like reusable travel mugs. That students also save 10 cents when they use those to purchase their coffee in. And so it's something that we already have solutions for. It's just getting people to make the behavior change. And encouraging people to change their behavior is probably the hardest thing any professional could do. And so it takes a long time, but that's what I'm going to try to convince you all to do today anyways, so we'll give it a shot. But this is how I define zero waste, and I think how the broader zero waste movement is starting to consider our goals. So it's not just about eliminating waste that's sent to landfills, but it's about how our economy is structured. And so this is what a circular economy map looks like. It doesn't really make that much sense, especially when you can't tell what the text says. I'm guessing you guys can't because I can't see it from here either. But currently we live in what's called a linear economy, where we make stuff, well, we extract stuff, and then we make stuff, and then we buy stuff, and then we throw stuff away. And there's more details that you could plug into that whole linear thing, but you get the idea. A circular economy instead suggests that, of course, at some point we extract things to make things. But once you've made a thing, that thing would be put back into the system at the end of its useful life. And so the reason that there's two sides to this diagram is that we have technological nutrients and we have biological nutrients. And so technological things are technology, so cars and computers and things that don't turn back into dirt in a short amount of time. And then the other side is stuff like food, your clothing that's made out of cotton, that sort of thing. And plastic kind of fits into the biological side because you can recycle it, but we'll just skip that detail right now. And so this is kind of the bigger picture, is like, how do we stop creating waste in the first place and make sure that our economy is better serving the communities that it is meant to support? One of the things I've been really stuck on in my local community is that I feel like our community thinks that the economy, or that like the community serves the economy, but it's really the other way around. Our economies should be serving the communities that they're in. So anyways, that's a whole nother topic. So before we dive into it too much, I just wanted to brush over some things because I'm sure you've heard a lot about the problem today. But on a big scale, the US is about 5% of the world's population, and we produce about 40% of the world's waste. Oh, there's a typo. I forgot to fix that. But the US also consumes about 25% of the world's annual fossil fuel resources. And so, like, you could try to say that it's not our problem, but I think the facts would speak otherwise. And I think in general, when the US decides to be a leader in our global economy, to be innovative and progressive in our environmental issues, for one, we have the responsibility to do it because we have the access to create solutions. But also, I think that the rest of the world looks to us to set a standard as well, and leadership is really important to me. But aside from like the facts and stuff, the money that we spend every day creates the world that we live in, whether we like it or not. And I think sometimes in the US, we're really disconnected from what that means and from how our dollars end up funneling out into the world, and what that influence and impact is. And so when you're starting to look at zero waste, you start to not just think about what kind of packaging is on your food, you also start looking at the packaging and seeing whether or not it's a B Corp certified sustainable company. You start to look at whether or not they donate a portion of their profits to local nonprofits as a 1% for the planet or any other sort of thing. And you start to look at whether it's locally made or if it's a woman-owned company, or if you can identify where it was made. All of these things start to matter when you start to think more about your individual choices when you're purchasing stuff. So it's not just a landfill problem, though that's where the story tends to end, but it's more about the entire system that leads up to that point. So we're going to talk about living zero waste, and I tend not to try to guilt people or make them feel bad about being wasteful, but instead to inspire them to see that being zero waste doesn't mean living less well. It actually, in my life, has made my life much, much more valuable, and like my time and I don't know, just everything in life started to look a lot happier. And I started saving money because I was buying less stuff. And I was saving time because I was having to meal prep in order for everything to be package free instead of everything coming out of a box or a can in my kitchen. And I was eating better because I was mostly, honestly, for like 2 months, I was super hungry because I thought I could only eat produce. And eventually I figured out how to shop in bulk aisles, which was a huge help. But most of my food is just normal, like it's completely unprocessed. So I buy oats and I buy beans and I buy, well, pasta I guess is processed to some extent. But like you're just eating the food, you're not buying it for a brand, which I think is really cool as well. And it's made life a lot more simple for me. And like I said, it added value back into every purchase that I was making. The example I like to give is that I bought a stick of chapstick. And I guess chapstick isn't something that people get really excited about that often, but I bought, I can't remember the brand anymore, but they sell it at the community food co-op, and it's made locally in Deming, Washington. And on the label you can see all the ingredients came from the farm that made the chapstick, except for like I think one ingredient, and it's like a B Corp certified chapstick and all sorts of things. And so even though this was only like a $2.50 purchase, every time I use the chapstick, I think about the benefit that sustainable companies can have and how our individual choices really do make a difference. And so everything in my life started to look that way. I would look at my closet and think about all the memories and how I went about digging through thrift stores to find these certain items that I was really looking for. And it just like brought so much more value to everything. So I hope you're convinced that this is worthwhile, because this is what we're going to keep rolling with. So I have 5 steps, and you don't have to start with any one in particular, but some of them might seem easier for you. And I would say instead of trying to do it all at once, which can be overwhelming, I would try to do one of these steps really perfectly, and then make it a normal habit, and then add on next steps to follow up. But you can do whatever you want. So the first one that I think seems too obvious to people, is recycling and composting. And this is a pretty simple thing to do, at least people think it is. The recycling industry is kind of complicated and ridiculous, and I would be happy to tell you in another 30-minute presentation why things are or are not recyclable, but we're not going to cover that today. So I think it's really important, though, that each of you go home today and Google whatever town you live in, and then their recycling standards, because what is recyclable varies depending on the community that you live in. And the reason that our recycling industry struggles sometimes is because, well, for one reason, they made it really complicated to recycle correctly, and then also, what was I going to say? Yeah, so it's, it's hard to learn to recycle, and then also, like, the recycling industry gets messed up because we put so many things that we think are recyclable into the recycling bin that are not, and that is then just an added expense to have to put in the time to take out the trash. And so it makes it less profitable for recycling companies to take our recycling. And this actually made it so that China would no longer accept recycling from the US as of this year, because we were sending them so much trash that we were calling recycling, and then they were losing money, and they were having to then landfill our waste in their country instead of in ours. And so that's like I said, whole nother 30-minute conversation at least. But composting, we're really lucky to live in Bellingham, where we have access to industrial composting through SSC, or Sanitary Services Company. And so all you have to do is set up that service, and then you can put it in a bin and it goes away and you never have to worry about it. Alternatively, you can Google how to compost in your backyard, or if you're a college student, how to compost in your dorm or in your apartment. And yes, there are solutions that you can use, and they're all pretty doable. So the other one that I think seems super obvious, this all is probably pretty obvious, but reuse is one of the easiest things to do when you're transitioning to zero waste. And it's one of the things that'll really start to save you money. So instead of buying more and more disposables, investing in a reusable option and then keeping it for a really long time is a great choice. And so up in the top corner is just a bunch of different reusable stuff. So like a reusable produce bag, or a reusable grocery bag, a water bottle, a travel mug, a bamboo fork that you keep in your purse all the time. These things seem kind of insignificant, but in the last 3 years, I've probably used 2 disposable plastic forks because I keep a bamboo utensil set in my purse at all times. And so if everybody did that, which is maybe optimistic, but I like to be optimistic, we would do a lot of good stuff. And then the mason jar thing kind of became a bit of a joke in the zero waste world. Because if you Google zero waste, you're going to see so many pictures of mason jars, and it's like funny, but also they're so useful, like for your coffee or your water or holding your trash in. So lots of reusable goods. And then buying in bulk, like I said, is just one of the easiest ways to start to reduce packaging for your food. So if you shop at the community food co-op, and I believe Fred Meyer will let you do this too, you can bring in your own containers. And at the community food co-op, they have a scale, so you can weigh all of your own containers and write the weight on the empty container. And then you just have to write the number of the item on the container itself as well. And then you just fill it up, and then you check out, and it's super easy. At Fred Meyer, you just check in at a checkout. Yeah, at a cashier, and they'll weigh the container for you on their scale, and you can write the number on it and then go back to the bulk aisle and do the same thing. Alternatively, you could use reusable bags, or the co-op also has paper bags, so you never have to bring reusables to go zero waste, because then you can just reuse or recycle those paper bags as well. And then I also just would like to point out that zero waste does not happen overnight, and you shouldn't just go out and buy a bunch of reusable stuff and throw away all of your things that are going to go to the landfill eventually anyways. So it's less intimidating if you just, use up the rest of your toothpaste, and then when your toothpaste runs out, you Google zero waste toothpaste, and then you make that one switch that day. And then maybe next month, your deodorant runs out. And so you're like, I wonder what a zero waste alternative would be. And so then you go and stand in the deodorant aisle for like 5 minutes at the co-op and think about it. And you'll probably figure it out. Or you Google zero waste deodorant recipe, and you make that switch that day. So over time, maybe in like 3 years, you'll be zero waste. And it's totally fine to take that long as well. And then the last thing is that you just give up. And I don't mean on the goal of going zero waste. I mean on the things that are just wasteful and you can't find an alternative. You just stop buying it. And it's hard. And you don't have to do it either. I think that the idea of zero waste is really intimidating for people because it's called zero waste. But how about just a little bit of waste? That's probably fine compared to the massive amounts of waste that the individual US consumer is producing every day. So if you want to buy ice cream or you want to buy potato chips and the carton is not recyclable or the bag has to go in the trash, I don't really care. I'm not going to judge you. Go for it. But also, there are really good zero waste alternatives. You can just go to the ice cream shop and get it in a cone and have ice cream a little less often. Or make potato fries, fries, at home. And those are a lot like eating potato chips. And I used to use a picture of a Snickers bar, the candy, as one of the things that you have to give up, because that was one of the things I gave up. And then I found a really great recipe for zero waste vegan Snickers that are way better than the actual thing. And you can kind of pretend that they're healthy. So I just want to say that, in general, you don't actually have to make sacrifices in your life, except for maybe convenience some of the time. But there are so many better alternatives out there that are zero waste anyways, and if there's not, you could invent it and start a company and sell that thing. And so the big idea, coming back to this idea that as consumers, it's not just about the waste that we're producing, but it's about the larger economy that we operate within, and that when you choose to support businesses that are already implementing zero waste practices and that are women-owned and are sustainably certified B corporations and donate a portion of their profits, your money is really going to change the world, which means that you are changing the world every single day. And so another tool that I wanted to share with you all is that if you're active on social media, you can follow the hashtag zero waste. And there are people like me all over the world that are doing zero waste and sharing their stories. And this is a great resource, especially if you Google your city and zero waste. You'll find different nonprofits that are advocating for city change. You'll find different zero wasters as well that makes you feel less alone in doing this big scary thing. And I have one final question for you, and I'm not going to give you time to talk to your neighbors about it because we're going to do the question thing. But this is what I would like you to answer today before you leave this symposium, is what is one thing that you could commit to this week to go zero waste? Whether it's bringing your water bottle with you all the time, or your travel mug, or buying the bamboo fork to keep in your purse or in your pocket. I guess if you don't have a purse, that's fine too. But one simple commitment could be the thing that starts you on your journey towards zero waste. So that's the big idea. And then beyond individual action, I think it's really important that we don't just think that this is a consumer problem. This is a community and a global problem. So I'd like to encourage you to take it beyond yourself and connect with your community, starting a community group on Facebook and advocating for city ordinances to ban things like styrofoam and plastic bags. Hosting a workshop like this is not as hard as it looks. I am starting to share resources like this on my blog, so if you want to give this exact same presentation somewhere else, you can take it off of my website and use it. I give you free reign. Just, yeah. And then, like I said, advocating for city ordinances is easier than it sounds. Starting a business that is zero waste, if there's not already an alternative out there and you see opportunity, is a cool thing to do. And then blogging about it. I think it's important that when we make sustainable choices in our lives that we share our stories and strive to inspire others. And so please feel free to check out trashyradical.weebly.com for information on doing these things. And then I would love to connect with you, so feel free to follow me on Instagram or Facebook or email me if you have questions. I'm around. And if you have questions right now, you can also ask them. Thank you. Okay, do you want this one or this one?
Either one.
Okay.
Okay, who's got questions? I'm going to get you twice. Okay, so I hope you know how privileged you are.
Yeah. So I'm just curious. You live in Leavenworth now, and I didn't catch what it is that you are doing there right now.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, in a town like Leavenworth that is a tourist economy, how receptive is the city to doing things like this, zero waste? I would imagine it's got different challenges than Bellingham.
Yes. So I currently live in Leavenworth, and I started as a gleaning coordinator literally last week with a nonprofit called Upper Valley Mend. And so I organize volunteers to go out to farms and glean produce that was left on the farms and then donate that to local food banks. And Leavenworth, surprisingly, is fairly conservative as a community because we're in Eastern Washington, so it's not quite as progressive as Bellingham. And because it is so business-oriented, anything that is perceived as being an extra expense to businesses or an extra burden on businesses get some pushback. But I started a local community group called Zero Waste Leavenworth, and we are currently advocating for a city ordinance that would ban plastic bags being distributed by all businesses, as well as styrofoam, disposable, non-recyclable, non-compostable to-go containers, which is what Seattle did in the last year, which became known as the straw ban, but actually the whole ban incorporated a lot of other products as well, not just straws. And we will not be banning straws in Leavenworth, at least not with the ordinance that Zero Waste Leavenworth is proposing. But we will require that straws are only available upon request in local businesses. And so, yes, we're trying to figure out how to work with the stakeholders of our community and to continue to make progress. But I was really surprised by the turnout of support in my own community. Within 24 hours, we had over 150 people join a Facebook group in support of this ordinance. And we have our first official meeting this week. So I'm hoping to find other leaders in the community. So, yeah. And we actually, one more thing, we do have a local nonprofit that is starting this upcoming month called Waste Loop, and they have already been approved by City Council to start an industrial composting facility for the community. So.
Okay. I have a question, Gwen, about health regulations and bringing your own container to a store. I've tried unsuccessfully. I've gotten pushback from the clerk. I want to get shrimp, but I don't want it wrapped in a plastic bag and in a plastic paper wrap. I want it in my own container, which had been weighed at the check stand. But she called the manager over and said, because they said, oh, the health department will not like that. Although I can use my own container to get peanut butter and almond butter. What's the deal with shrimp and meat? I mean, is that really the health department thing, or is it just the store clerk didn't like it?
Yeah, so I don't really, frankly, get the whole health department issue. On our campus, I tried to fill up a jar with soup in the cafe, and although I can give Starbucks my coffee mug and they'll fill it up with coffee, I couldn't put soup into a jar using a ladle, which didn't make much sense to me. And so I understand your frustration. I will say my one experience at the community food co-op, and I really don't want to get the person in trouble that did this for me because I don't know if he was supposed to, but I could get salmon at the deli put into my own Tupperware. And so definitely there are grocery stores that are willing to do it. And my other thing would be just keep asking them. I think if a lot of people just keep going in with their Tupperware and asking to get shrimp, maybe not shrimp, like you can get whatever you want at the deli, but the more that we ask for it, the more likely they are to make the change. Alternatively, I would say reach out to the health department and ask them to clarify. Okay, cool.
Let's thank Gwen Larned.